another session with Kate, and what I want to do, and I was explaining to her during the break, was to go back to my roots of memorobics and actually focus on scent aerobics. And I didn't know about horticulture therapy. I didn't know how to pronounce horticulture, or I knew it was kind of horticultural. See, I still don't know. I knew it was having to do with outdoors. But what I did was to try to figure out a way to get someone to use their sense of smell. And what Kate has done is to use all of the senses in a natural setting with plants, both live and dried. But Kate, here's what we did during, after I realized what I was doing and did scent aerobics with some crude things. We then, during our second round of clinical trials, we got this set. And it's a set of intense oils. And they range from the known, which would be orange, rosemary, but we also had some that I'd never, some Chinese, there's a tea berry, and there's a tea tree bark of some kind. There's all sorts of essences. We personally got it, or we chose to get a mix of familiar and ones that we were sure nobody had smelled. Here's how we use them. We would take the time, no hurry, we would take, starting with the familiar, and explain that this is an odorant that is coming off of this. So there's an odorant, and the oil is still here on the dropper. The odorant is then surrounding it. If I move it, this cloud stays here.
Sure, yeah.
So if you're going to try to teach someone who's older who says, I can't smell anything,
Right.
I've lost my taste buds too,
Yeah.
you teach them that when you have an odor as intense as this, it does release a cloud, but it's not like a spray bottle.
Right.
So that when you do that, you have to then have them put their nose in the cloud.
Right.
That's the term we use. So what we're going to do is we're going to then hold it under their nose like this, so that we never run into rubbing this, and then have them stick their nose in the cloud, and oh yeah, you got that one, didn't you? And then what we did is to make sure that they know, so we're educating along the way, make sure they know that if they test this to see, what is that smell? Like this, all of the odorants just went in my lungs. So we teach them that the way your brain gets the scent is to have those molecules in the cloud go into the top of your nose. Because the top of your nose is where your brain makes contact. That's why when I got a cold in my nose, you can't smell.
Right.
So if you can have someone learn through that process, that if I do this and then put my nose in the cloud, sniff 3 times, and then stop and even shut your eyes and think, you have the best chance. Then we did this. So we used the, for instance, on the orange, we even milk that one. We take the orange and we would say,
juiced it, as it were.
Yeah, and tell everyone in the group of 6 or 8 or 20 people, don't guess yet. And what's going to happen with that scent of orange is you're going to have a few people who say lemon, and once in a while lime, because it's a citrus
Sure,
smell.
of course.
But unless you, and then you tell them who got it right, unless you have an orange and a lemon, you can't tell the difference if it's only one. You're guessing.
That's interesting.
So then the next week we would pull out another one without showing them. And it would be, do you remember a week later or 2 days later? And when we have an unusual one like the bark of some tree, that's one that they've never ever smelled before, and that's encoding a new memory. And the goal is some retrieval, some encoding. So when you encode a new memory and can remember it next week, that's a major effort. And you might not remember it for 2 or 3 tries, but eventually neuroplasticity is at work, because 3 times and then you know that smell. So if that same concept could be expanded, if I'd have known about horticultural therapy, I would have ended up saying, well, let's pull things in. The only one I did was pine cones.
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
But I didn't use, I use those for touch. That's what I used in my touch aerobics. I know there's a smell, but I didn't think of it then. But what we did was to have a box with pine cones in it. So one session we had everybody look, and the pine cones had names, labels that were right next to them. And then the next session they got to touch. I think we smelled them, but I didn't really use that. But then we put them in a box that they could put their hand through,
Right.
and we put one pine cone at a time and try to have them identify. So they use their eye brain next week to say, do I remember which
Right.
one?
Right.
By my eyes. The next was, do I
It's
remember
touch.
them?
Sure.
Touch.
Sure.
Now, nature has so many different ways that that could be effective, to have someone encode a new memory and bring it back. You mentioned in an earlier segment about how when you had the smell of lavender or of lilac or the vision of a bloom of a flower brings back Grandma's garden.
Of course.
Tell me if I'm on the right track.
You're completely on the right track, and as we're talking about it, I'm thinking that scent is almost, it's so evoking for people, memory evoking for people. It's, I think, almost more so than any other sense.
Here's the science. It is. You're exactly right. It is the absolute entryway to memory, and there's a physical reason, and that's that your nose holds the key to the immediate entry to the hippocampus and the amygdala. Now think of this. It's the only place in the brain only place in the body that the brain neurons actually touch the outside world. To hear, we use microphones called ears.
Sure, of course.
To see, we use cameras called eyes. We touch things and it sends it to and processes, and we think, what's that? But the scent, taste, it has to go through the gustatory system. And okay, what is that? Which of the 5 tastes? But when it's smell, science has shown that you react to a smell and identify it in a time sequence. First, you react to it, and don't even think, your brain doesn't think what it is, it reacts first. If it's a smell of smoke, for instance, it's a run. It is emergency. But if it's something that is gentle, your brain will, just a nanosecond before it recognizes lavender, it will relax a little bit. So now keep going. I hate to interrupt you, but when you said, I think it's the most memory evoking, hands down, it's the winner.
Well, it's interesting because I mentioned in the previous segment that we always start our sessions with something called What's in Bloom, which is just it's a title for an activity. And basically what I do is go outside, I find 5 things that appeal to me for some reason. Maybe they're unusual looking, or maybe they're beautiful today because
but they're in bloom now.
Not necessarily in bloom, but for some reason, catching my eye.
Well, should I say that they're alive today?
They're alive today, certainly growing outside. There's something about them that's unique to today, right?
Okay.
So that's orienting, seasonally, day orienting, weekly orienting. But I go out and we bring them in, and a group, we pass them around one by one by one. And, we'll go through all of the senses, but the smell almost always is. Sometimes I see people just get lost in the smell.
Do they shut their eyes?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
One of the reasons is that you only can remember 7 plus or minus 2 things, and when someone is savoring anything, the food, the music, or especially the scent, by shutting their eyes, they're able to focus just a little bit better.
All right. And especially in an older population,
Yes.
that would make a lot of sense in a group.
Now, in this, do you guide them? Do you give them verbal and encourage them?
Sometimes verbal cueing, or sometimes just, if I do it, what do we call that, mimicking?
Yes, yes.
Pass it, and then they'll immediately do the same thing. And if there's other challenges, you can use verbal cues.
And then do you have discussions?
Absolutely. And right around the room, it never fails that at least one person has something associated with the smell.
Now, I've watched you in action and have admired the way you can encourage, but you don't go down paths that take a lot of time to let someone talk for a long period of time.
You have to redirect people.
How do you do that?
How do I redirect people?
How do you do that?
Well, we say, that's fascinating. Now let's see what Mary remembers about when she was a little girl, or whatever it is, So it's all very
Keep it
gentle,
moving.
and also, what's the word? You want to be encouraging. You want to be thankful and grateful to their participation, to honor it, if you will, right? But then, it's time for somebody
So you let
else.
the next person build upon it, but not let someone monopolize the time.
And sometimes that's hard, as you know.
That's wonderful. Anything else on this topic that you want to toss in?
Wow, there's so much you can do with this, so much. And I think relating, if you can use the scent with another one of the senses, whether it's you know, any one of them really.
Okay.
It just strengthens.
Then I'm going to end on the word combinatorial.
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 Okay.
It's in the literature. We embraced it about 5 years ago when it first started popping up. Multi-domain, multifaceted, all those. But if you think of a combination as being richer than either of the two parts, and you can get, in your case, your situation, you can get a memory of a feel of something with the smell. Or if you have someone who smells something, and then they can actually see the bloom, or they see the stalk, they see whatever it is they're crushing in their hands, that can bring back a memory. So you're combining the 5 senses.
And that, just one last thing, would be a perfect way for, it's really important that you recognize people's challenges when you're doing that, because if somebody can't see, for instance, you might want to make sure that they're feeling it.
Excellent.
Right? So it wouldn't be the same for all participants necessarily.
But what you're doing, that goes back to the assessment that you spoke of earlier, that if you're doing the assessment and know that one person is challenged in a certain way, you make sure you're ready for whatever challenges, and that's the experience that you get over the years.
Indeed.
And sharing that with the students is exactly why I asked you to be here. Thank you very much. Okay, now we're going to go to Gary. We've talked about groups in other segments. In this segment, I want Kate Bodin to focus on an individual. There's a different technique, a different assessment. There are different tools you're going to need and different skills. So Kate, whether it's a single example or more general, can you share something about how someone would design a cognitive activity to apply to an individual situation?
Well, I work with a really wonderful gentleman who he's 70 years old and was in a secure mental institution for quite a number of years, and about a year ago was allowed to move to a foster care home. And he had always had a garden in this place that he had been in, his own raised bed, I guess. And after he moved to the foster care home, his case manager and the owner of the home realized that his behavior after a few months, so this was February to about May, had started to degenerate, and they were very concerned that they were going to have to re-institutionalize him. So the case manager had worked with Earth Tone's music therapist before and knew that we had started to offer horticultural therapy and said, I wonder if this would be a useful thing for him. So she called me up and I said, of course I'd love to come meet him. No nervousness at all. But I went to the house and met his owner and I met Gary. Oh, I don't know if I should really say his name. I guess I can. But
yeah, we have permission.
Yeah. Okay.
Go ahead.
And instantly, really connected with him on an actual interesting level because I drew from my academic experience. He's a brilliant man. And we connected right away, and I asked him to show me the outside, which is a fenced-in concrete patio. And that is his outdoor space. And after he'd been able to be outside in his garden for 5 years or whatever it was evident that he needed to get his fingers in the dirt,
so
literally.
You knew immediately that something was working.
Absolutely. I don't know if that's innate or it was, in talking to him is, well, would you like to have a garden again? It's absolutely. And what can we do out here on this patio to give you back a garden?
How big is the patio area that's fenced in?
Well, it's oh gosh, I don't know, maybe 10 feet across the back of the house, whatever.
So it isn't like a big plot of land at all.
No, well, unfortunately, there's a beautiful yard on the outside with an old garden. So it's kind of like there's all the temptations, but you can't get there. There's little pools out there that are.
So, but this is his space to work. Okay.
Well, he shares it with his housemates. So
okay.
There's one woman who does all the flower gardening, but it was clear that we could certainly start with pots, right?
Yes, yes.
And so he was pretty excited about that, and he immediately wanted to grow. He knew that he wanted to grow beans, and a beefsteak tomato.
He was adamant.
Period.
He said, that's what I want to
Well,
eat.
Well, I'm not even sure that he really ate them, but his father was a gardener.
Oh, I see.
And he
Okay.
watched his father all during his childhood. And so we started working outside in the garden, and I came and I did an assessment with him. Now, this was different because it was just one-on-one, and we knew that we needed to get his behavior redirected immediately. And, you know, for me, it just seemed so... I mean, what would happen if I didn't have access to my garden?
Yeah.
And that's almost how I approached it, I guess. I said I would be, you know, probably depressed.
You'd go into withdrawal symptoms.
I would go into
Yeah.
withdrawal, that's right. So we immediately started setting up these pots and filling them with soil. And we didn't have any facilities for indoor growing, but it was May at that point. So I actually bought some starts so that we'd have instant gratification. And we started keeping, I realized that planning for him was something he needed to plan his time very, very carefully. He knew exactly what time he needed to stop, what time he needed to start. He'd be waiting for me when I arrived. And we started keeping a photographic journal of his garden.
Was that something he came up with, or is that?
No, I came up with it because I thought it was important for him to see progress, and most importantly, what was going to happen in the wintertime when he didn't have as much access to his garden, right? So I wanted him to be able to go back when it became, say, December, for instance. I wanted him to be able to look back over the past year and find out and look and watch the progress of his entire garden, and then to be able to take that and start planning for the next year.
So you are really looking at using the photographs as a way to have him look ahead by reflecting on what he did personally. Do you include him? You include him in the photographs?
Sometimes yes, sometimes it's only his hands, sometimes it's the both of us.
But it's
always his garden.
It's his garden.
It's his garden, and the whole binder is, it's a old photograph binder, and it says Gary's Garden right on the front of it.
Do you plan to use seed catalogs to have him make decisions?
We did. We started doing that. One of the funny thing is this winter, of course, was so lovely that we didn't have too many rainy days. And
That's true.
But we planted garlic out in November in the garden. We planted pansies. We had some perennials. We have strawberries and blueberries going on. And every single day, every single week, we go out and we look in the garden. It doesn't matter if it's raining, snowing, freezing. We go out and we look in the garden because we want to be able to track progress. And progress and growth for him means that he's being able to take care and nurture. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, and when it's a living thing and there's a responsibility to it, the studies out of Chicago have shown that when there is that social interaction with others, something is released in the brain, and it's probably a brain chemical, that masks the symptoms that might manifest if they were deprived of that interaction. And listen to this, interaction with others that's the research term. And they didn't use people. They said interaction, socializing with others. And the takeaway there is that the others certainly means pets, but it also has to mean living things. And when you said you want to show him and focus, pay attention during your visits on rain or shine, what is going on in the garden, because that's a living thing. And that may be where horticultural therapy is going with the science that's coming. It's only confirming what you already know. But when the science can confirm that it does have a measurable effect on people's health, that's when it blossoms or flourishes.
Literally, yeah. I'll tell you a really lovely story. I mentioned earlier that there's a few times, I probably can count on one hand during my career as a horticultural therapist, where I've almost been reduced to tears because it's, I know that what I'm doing is so profound. And so in the summertime when we've got a harvest, right, we go out and we harvest from these wonderful pots that he's taking care of, and he takes care of them in the week when I'm not there.
And this is Gary again.
Yes, it is.
Okay,
yeah.
go ahead.
And he grew, as I say, he doesn't always like to eat everything that we grow. He did taste some basil one day, and I was like, it's like, like, well, but we'll give it to the house to cook. So everything gets harvested every Wednesday. We go out with a plate, we bring it in, and they cook it. They cook it for the other residents, which is really lovely. But one day we harvested beans, and they were beautiful beans, and we always count them. And I think that day, I forget, there was 18 beans or something, like string beans, you know?
Good idea.
Green beans.
Sure.
And so we were showing them to his roommate, if you will, another resident there who, she's the one who does all the flowers, right? So we're holding out this plate, and I always say to him, why don't you talk to her about what we did in the garden today? What did we harvest? And he started, he'll say 19 beans and 1 zucchini or whatever. And she said, oh, I love beans. and so he didn't quite catch that cue, but I said, Carrie, you might want to offer her a bean. So he did that, and she just took one bite. She said, oh, this is so wonderful. And the grin on his face was, there it was, for him, meaningful activity.
The grin on his face. Seeing his friend snap a bean
and enjoying it. So for her, brand right off the bush, not from a store, not canned, not frozen, for him to be able to give that when he has really, or feels he has very little ability to give.
Yeah.
Right? Huge.
Think of the oxytocin, and that's my guess as to what was released in her brain when she remembered being a kid and going to the garden, snapping a bean, eating it, and then in his brain it would be a different type and a different level of intensity of sharing.
Right.
And when someone, as you just beautifully said, he isn't in a position where he can give very much, well, he's probably going to, after that, be in a position to say, I want to give again and again. So that's the type of thing that can motivate him to want to really get a garden that make sure we have beans because he would remember.
Because Irene wants them. That's her name. But anyway.
That is just a wonderful story. Well, I've got a few more questions I'm going to save for the next segment. And thank you for a real targeted individual effort to bring something to one person and look at how it radiated or rippled out.
Right.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you.
And what's the lead into this?
I don't know. We could talk about, again, we could talk about how it's important to, well, in this case, this woman clearly she wasn't really,
okay,
it's very difficult for her to work with the group. Okay?
That internship is really robust here. Why don't I go from, is that part of your PCC internship?
It was the horticultural therapy
but
internship.
But it was PCC?
No, it's
Legacy?
HTA.
Okay.
It's a requirement for becoming registered. But we could talk about it from what happens when you have a group of people where one person is clearly lower functioning than the others.
So you used a group event and then tagged a person and...
I didn't, it just is the way I had to work with a group that was...
How about the word dynamic, that when you're working with a group, there are times when you have to be nimble and you have to be observant and watch for things?
You certainly do. But what happens if you've got somebody who's clearly not able to participate, but may appear to want to? Isn't necessarily completely as passive as you might think. So we talk about observation.
Yeah. So I'll go ahead and mention Gleason Center in my setup so you don't have to.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's okay.
Okay.
Gleason Care Center, yeah.
We're here with Kate Bodin, and Kate, you were talking to me earlier about the Gleason Center and some of the work, Gleason Care Center, some of the work that you did there. Can you share that with our students as to what happened at the Gleason Care Center?
Absolutely. Do you want me to just talk about the last time I was there?
Explain what that is. Some people wouldn't know about that and your background.
Right. So the Gleason Care Center is a long-term care facility, so nursing home basically for people that might not understand that term, and also a rehab facility. So we've got people who are unable to live on their own or have their relatives or anybody else take care for them at home, and they need 24-hour access to medical care. And I actually did my internship, part of my internship for to be a registered horticultural therapist, you have to have about 1,000-hour internship, and it's actually 480 hours, but Teresa doubled it now.
Okay.
And I just had to qualify
Yeah.
that. Anyway, I did my internship there, and now I have my interns go there because I think it was a terrific training ground.
It was
for me.
challenging, though, wasn't it?
Extremely challenging.
Why? Why was it challenging?
Well, you have, I've always tried to keep the group to no more than 8, and even that is a lot. Not a whole lot of extra staff there available to work with you during a session. So most of the time you're on your own, not because they wouldn't like to be, by the way, but so people of very varying levels, some medically fragile people, but all interested in not gardening so much, but nature or flowers or whatever it is. So we have an intern, as I said, we have an intern there now, and one thing that I do with my interns is have them observe me. And because I was so familiar with the site from having done my internship there, I went back just recently, a week or 2 ago, and conducted a session so that she could observe me.
Okay.
And which was great because she'd been there for a month or so and sort of understood the lay of the land. So we did, it was in honor of St. Patrick's Day, so we did a potato study. And then I had carved some shamrocks into the potatoes, and we did rubber, green stamps on cards.
Okay.
So anyway, long story short, I was just loving being there, and there was one woman who was clearly not able to participate at the level of the others, and actually in that group it was a particularly high functioning group that day, and this one woman was very I couldn't put my finger on quite maybe what the situation was, but she was very slow to react in almost every way, whether it was her head turning, her emotions, her facial affects, but it was clear that she wasn't interested in just remaining receptive or passive, right? So she did have one of the other residents was there, being not only her right hand, but both hands. So I actually had to redirect that resident to say, no, you need to do your own work as well. So what happened was we were working on these cards, and some people whipped through them, and this one woman wanted to make a card for her son, who comes to visit her every single day. And he was coming that afternoon, of course. So I had others were working happily together and helping each other. And so I came over behind, and I was sitting next to this woman, or standing next to her, and trying to get her helper to stay away. And I said, okay, where would you like, here, let me teach you how to hold a potato, and so that you could stamp it. And I said, okay, now point to where on the paper you want to stamp it. And she could do that. And so she would do that. And I said, okay, now take the potato and stamp it. And so she did that. And so she made a beautiful card.
Wow.
And so when everything was said and done and we were wrapping up the session, and she was looking at me, and I said to her, your son is going to be so delighted with your card. And I could see this smile starting. It's going to make me cry.
Smile that you hadn't seen throughout that entire
throughout
session.
the whole thing. She had very flat affect.
Oh.
And so a smile started, and I just looked at her, and I said, you have such a beautiful smile. And she just broke into this grin, and it was like all I could do not to cry. It was, look, I'm just weeping now. Well, I wanted to take her picture, but I didn't.
When that happens, it happens because of the time that she spent there and that she accomplished it.
She accomplished, yeah.
The move that you made to say, allow her to succeed. You didn't say the word succeed, but you let her succeed.
Yeah.
And then you tied it to the son who's coming.
Right.
Who probably is going to also value that. It's something that she created. Wow.
And for her, again, here's meaningful activity.
Yes.
Here's a gift that she can give that's tangible, a way that she could express herself with when she can't express herself.
Yeah.
Right? Does it make sense?
Yeah, exactly.
So it was a...
Wow. Okay, I may put this segment into both the cognitive activity design and the arts and cognitive activity design.
Sure.
And the reason is that we explain how in the creative arts section, there's the art makers and the art takers, not in a negative way. And we also call it the doers and the viewers.
Of course.
There are
of course,
benefits for
of
both.
course there are.
They're both valuable. But when you have the doers, there's a separate, maybe it's a separate electrical chemical response in the brain
of course, yeah.
that happens. And then there's that feeling of pride that she did this. And that's the smile when you said, and what was it? Your son's going to love this?
Yeah, something like that.
Think of all the electrical activity when she may not have realized that what she is creating with those two hands is going to go to the son who's going to be there. When that connection formed the smile, and then what you did because of your experience and your big heart, you then complimented her on the smile,
Right.
which she probably doesn't do very often.
Not probably, it would be my guess.
Look at
yeah.
all, let's get an fMRI on her brain and figure that had we been able to see what's going on, that woman would have been healthier in measurable and immeasurable ways. And it didn't end when you left. It ended,
Right.
or it may have resonated with the son,
My son's visit, yeah.
who might not have believed that mom made this,
Imagine if she could do that every day.
or at least every so often.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, we never know when we're working with an individual who has challenges whether he or she might remember, but the brain does. The
Yep.
brain remembers if it's tied especially to emotion.
Indeed.
And
Indeed.
when we teach the Aging Mind class, there's an Iowa study that we often throw in, and I want our students to listen to what I think might happen if you came back or your intern came back and did something with that same person, that challenged person. What if we could prove she really didn't remember ever doing it before? But would the emotion that you helped generate
Right.
still be memorable? Here's the study. They took a group of people who were maybe in the same condition that the lady was challenged, people who were in this study mid to serious memory cognitive issues, including advanced Alzheimer's. And what he did was to go in with an idea that if we show someone having emotion, how long does someone remember emotion? So what they did was to have people in the morning watch a very, very seriously sad clip, a short clip, 15 minutes worth of Old Yeller and several movie clips that are just emotional heart pullers. And they filmed them so that they knew that they were teary-eyed, that they had emotions, and then they had them eat lunch, took a nap, and in the mid to late afternoon, they asked them, how's your day? Oh, not so good. What happened? Oh, I just feel sad. And here's the key question. Why are you sad? I don't know. They could not remember what caused the sadness, but they knew that that emotion stayed there. Then they even cued them by saying, well, did you watch a sad movie or something today? They didn't have the memory of what caused the sadness. Next week, next round of the same humans, they showed humorous clips, the same amount of minutes, including the famous Lucy scene with the chocolate that comes by, and they knew that they were laughing and having a good time because, same thing, they filmed the faces, the laughter, the emotion that was pulled out by watching. Then, eat lunch, take a nap. How's your day? Great. How do you feel? I feel great. Why? It's just a good day. Did you watch a movie? I don't remember it. And here's the headline of that study was, emotion outlasts memory. Well, what if what happened to you on that day where you witnessed someone really have that emotion? That's going to outlast for a period of time, potentially any memory of what happened.
Of course.
So you said if she could get a dose of that every couple of weeks or every week, that's the future of cognitive interventions.
Of
and
course,
that
of
story.
course, of
Thank
course.
you so
You're
much.
welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, and thank you, Kate, for being
You're
here, and thank you for
welcome.
staying for a little
My
extra.
pleasure. My pleasure.
I appreciate knowing you as a friend.
Likewise.
Okay, thank you.